The aid we provided to Ukraine, 90% of it actually stayed in the United States. Faced with repeated questioning from American society regarding aid to Ukraine, U.S. Secretary of State Blinken finally couldn't hold back and spoke the blunt truth. According to Blinken, the majority of this aid was spent within the United States, primarily benefiting American arms manufacturers, creating job opportunities in the country. Hence, it's a win-win situation, and we need to keep it going. Since the Biden administration took office, the promised military aid to Ukraine has reached a total of $30 billion. These military supplies were delivered in the form of weapon shipments to the Ukrainian battlefield, all originating from major American arms manufacturers. By Blinken's calculation, Ukraine only received aid worth $3 billion. Given Ukraine's prevalent corruption, a significant portion of the weapons and equipment were sold off by the Ukrainian military. How much of it actually made it to the battlefield? No wonder the war has been ongoing for 2 years without a clear resolution. In this video, we'll be addressing the lucrative aspect for the United States in international warfare, discussing the following: America's substantial gains from the Ukraine conflict, the military-industrial complex, the historical evolution of the military-industrial complex, the current state of the military-industrial complex. U.S. Defense Secretary Austin recently stated in the Reagan Defense Forum, "In our supplemental budget request, around $50 billion will be allocated to our defense industrial base. This will create or support tens of thousands of good jobs in over 30 states, including manufacturing missiles in Arizona, vehicles in Wisconsin and Indiana, and shells in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Texas." Since the escalation of the Ukrainian crisis, the U.S. military-industrial sector has witnessed a period of prosperity, with many factories ramping up production, including the manufacture of various munitions extensively used in the Ukrainian battlefield. Workers in arms production are working overtime, and the towns hosting these factories are thriving, everyone seemingly content. The U.S. military has a more strategic angle, sending outdated weaponry to Ukraine while equipping its own forces with newly manufactured advanced arms, a true two-for-one deal. The situation on the Ukrainian battlefield isn't a concern for American arms dealers. They've made their money, and so has Ukrainian President Zelensky. He has purchased yachts overseas and amassed substantial wealth. His wife spent over $1 million in luxury stores in the United States. Meanwhile, the exact count of casualties among Ukrainian soldiers remains unclear to date. What we do know is that Ukraine's conscription has fallen into dire straits, with the elderly, infirm, and women being pushed into combat. All thanks to the U.S. military-industrial complex. The so-called military-industrial complex is a consortium of shared interests comprising top military officials, giant arms dealers, certain members of Congress, defense research institutions, representatives from military political think tanks, and members of the media sphere. Its operational model works as follows: arms dealers lobby, Congress supports, the government engages in warfare, arms dealers sell goods, and the media misleads, collectively profiting. The United States stands as the world's largest arms-producing nation. Presently, across 31 states and 71 cities in the U.S., there are 117 operational weapon production lines. Roughly 30% of American companies have significant ties to the military-industrial sector, directly or indirectly contributing to a quarter of all jobs in the country. Essentially, the backbone of U.S. domestic manufacturing centers around arms production. Manufacturing weaponry requires successful sales, yet arms aren't commodities like automobiles or appliances used in daily life. Consequently, the U.S. persuades the world to engage in warfare. As soon as conflict arises, the consumption of arms becomes incessant. According to incomplete data, from the end of World War II until 2001, there have been 248 armed conflicts in 153 regions worldwide, with the U.S. initiating around 201 of them. The U.S. military-industrial complex propels this war machine, spreading conflict globally. The structure of the military-industrial complex is essentially a perfect existence born for combat. To be honest, it's a stubborn tumor entrenched in the body of capitalist society. The historical roots of the military-industrial complex predate U.S. history, theoretically emerging as a product of representative democracy, first hinted at in ancient Rome. The late period of ancient Rome witnessed an imperial system, but after several strong rulers, imperial power gradually waned, leaving actual authority in the hands of the Senate. The aristocratic Senate, dominated by financial elites, formed an alliance of interests with the military, constantly seeking external expansion for gains, giving rise to the earliest form of a military-political complex. Modern America's military-industrial complex mirrors this triangle of military, political, and industrial entities, akin to ancient Rome but in a different context. The potential of this structure was also recognized by capitalist theorists. In the 18th century, British economist Adam Smith proposed the relationship between defense and wealth, highlighting how foreign trade could bring wealth to a nation, foster industrial development, support a robust military, and, in turn, safeguard and expand trade with colonies. In the late 20th century, historian Charles Tilly pointed out that coercion and capital, the monopoly of violence, and a continuous flow of funds for war were key elements in the rise of modern capitalist states. The early American corporate community served as the non-military prototype of the military-industrial complex. Originating in the late 18th century New England textile industry, these joint stock companies shared ownership and common members within the board of directors, collectively mitigating business risks. This model extended into the military industry, intertwined with the early American military system. The fledgling United States relied on local militias independent of the British colonial rule, lacking a military system or weaponry. To ensure the safety of the newborn American Republic, Congress decided to establish a defense military-industrial complex led by the government, primarily consisting of private military industries. This was the embryonic stage of the modern American military-industrial complex. After World War I erupted, European battlefronts began purchasing weapons from American arms dealers, resulting in substantial profits for U.S. military-industrial enterprises. During World War II, the American military-industrial industry experienced an exponential surge. Major American defense corporations secured two-thirds of government contracts, establishing direct ties with government officials and financial groups. The U.S. produced over 80,000 tanks, 260,000 aircraft, and 155 various types of carriers, a count surpassing the combined total of the Axis powers. American military industries experienced unprecedented growth, with many civilian enterprises transitioning into military production, reaping immense profits. Following the Pearl Harbor incident, the U.S. established the War Production Board, where key decisions were dictated by major American defense corporations. This signaled the expansion of military influence across the upper echelons of U.S. society, marking the formation of the military-industrial complex. During the Cold War, as tensions escalated between the U.S. and the Soviet Union, the U.S. government placed increasing emphasis on national defense and security. American defense contractors not only met the defense needs of the U.S. government but also undertook a considerable amount of arms trade from European allies and around the world. Seizing this rare opportunity, arms dealers flexed their muscles in U.S. congressional and presidential elections, as well as in the selection of state governors. Leveraging their significant financial resources and influence in various industries, they provided funds, votes, and advertising for presidential candidates, governors, and congressional members, eventually forming the enormous interest group composed of the military, defense contractors, and some U.S. congressmen that we see today. Today, American defense contractors have entered a phase of high monopoly. At the end of the Cold War, the U.S. had 51 major defense contractors. In just 30 years, only 5 major defense contractors remain: Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, General Dynamics, and Raytheon. The Pentagon assigns the majority of its defense contracts to these 5 companies. The stocks of these 5 companies are primarily held by a few Wall Street financial giants and their associates, such as Citibank, Rockefeller, Morgan, and others. Financial capital relies on the dominance of the U.S. dollar to redistribute global wealth. This redistribution often occurs through the military-industrial complex's involvement in geopolitical conflicts or wars. Furthermore, the military-industrial complex influences key electoral districts through projects and employment, thereby binding interests with politicians. They also spend vast sums on lobbying politicians to secure a larger share in defense budgets. A stable relationship of interest transmission exists among the Pentagon, Capitol Hill, and defense contractors. With progress, some emerging critical industries like aerospace, energy, electronics, information technology, and biotechnology are increasingly entangled in the military-industrial complex. Deeply embedded in the information industry and the internet economy, the U.S. military has various regulations and means to demand backdoors from internet products, a fact that has been exposed multiple times. Elon Musk's SpaceX, with its Falcon rockets and Starlink program, also has close ties to the military-industrial complex. An infamous example is Starlink's use on the Ukrainian battlefield. The American military-industrial complex not only controls mainstream media but also dominates public opinion by buying off experts and scholars, amplifying threats and fears, and brainwashing the general population in every possible way. The 5 major media conglomerates monopolize nearly 90% of traditional media channels, while social media is heading towards monopoly, providing the military-industrial complex with new means of manipulating public opinion. The military and defense corporations also fund entertainment products such as movies, animated games, implanting military values from childhood and fostering a bellicose mindset. Transformers stands as the most blatant example. With the inclusion of think tanks and media, the military-industrial complex has become even more invincible in today's era. The U.S. currently possesses 12 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, 71 nuclear submarines, and over 13,000 fighter jets, yet this is still insufficient for the military-industrial complex. Approximately 100,000 people are shot annually in the U.S., with over 30,000 fatalities, but the military-industrial complex, driven by self-interest, will never allow gun control. Despite raking in 90% of profits from the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the military-industrial complex feels it's not enough. Therefore, Ukraine cannot cease fire or engage in peace talks. Zelensky must continue fighting. The more chaotic the world, the more the US profits. This is America's logic. This is the end of this video. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and comment. We genuinely appreciate your support.